Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Maoist Third Worldist Collective. I wanted to make this podcast, in a sense, as an addendum to my previous podcast. I wanted to add some things which I should have said, but I forgot. So let me go ahead and do that now. Those of us living in the first world, especially people like me, who occupy the top 3% of wealth in the United States, which I am not proud of. I wish that were not the case. I honestly do. It was not intentional. It just happened. It was fortuitous. I did not plan it. I did not work on it. I was not consciously an investor, but it just turned out that my pension investments paid off even though I never checked them. So here I am in this situation. And what this has forced me to do, perhaps more than most, I don't know. But I think so. I think more than most, because I think that if I did not have what I have, that I would not be inclined to think the way that I'm thinking right now quite as much. I mean, I would feel some responsibility toward the third world and toward Palestine, but nowhere near as much as I actually feel right now. Not even close. Not even close. I don't deserve what I have, and yet I have it. And so here I am. A man with much beyond his own needs. I'm trying to help others, and I will help more in the future, especially after I die. But regardless, I'm not saying this certainly out of self-pity. I mean, what do I have to be self-pitying about? Seriously. I say this out of a sense of responsibility for the position that I occupy, for the status, intended or not. In my case, not. And for what I think I owe the world right now. And I do think I owe the world a lot, especially the third world, including Palestine. Maybe in my case, I should say especially Palestine. Why? Because even though I was raised in a non-religious Jewish family and grew up in Jewish neighborhoods in New York City, in the Bronx, and in Bayside, Queens, without any awareness really of what it meant to be a Jew. I had no concept of what being Jewish was. I probably have more of a concept now, since I left the religion at 14, than I did when I was still in it. So it's a very confusing situation for me. But I do think that I have a deep responsibility to do whatever I can to help the third world. But And I'm hesitant to speak for other people, but I will anyway. If it's inappropriate, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be inappropriate. I realize that a lot of people who live in the United States live from paycheck to paycheck, something that I will never, as far as I know, have to worry about for the rest of my life. I know that there are a lot of people here in the United States who are a part of the fourth world, poor Native Americans, many of my fellow autistics who spend their lives living in poverty. The standard of living of autistics is substantially below the national average. A lot of autistics are desperately poor. And it's not only autistics. It goes on to other categories of disabled individuals, whether neurologically, as in my case, physically, emotionally, mentally. There are many people here in the United States who are suffering. And my heart goes out to them. And I feel a duty to help them too. And I am trying. I am trying. I don't talk about the specifics ordinarily because I think that's private. Plus, I think to discuss it that much might be construed as bragging. And I think it would be bragging in a sense. So I keep that to myself for the most part, as much as I can. Even though I am not visibly wealthy, I drive around in a 2015 Nissan Versa. I live in a nice condo, but not spectacular. I mean, there are people in this condo complex who live in condos exactly like mine, who only receive Social Security and Medicare. So this is not a super fancy condo complex. There are some like that around here. I wanted no part of that. I don't need it. It's just me. I have no family here. I do have family, but they exist far, far away from me, whether on the West Coast or in the Northeast. Certainly not in the South or Southwestern states like Texas. So it's just me that I have to be concerned about. And my needs are minimal. As I've said before, I realized I was spending much too much money eating out in expensive restaurants. At the same time, as I receive a large carton of Nutrisystem food by FedEx every month. Food which basically goes to waste for the most part. For the most part. So my concern is not for my own well-being. But let me expand upon that even more. Even those people listening right now, those people who are not in the fourth world, but who live in the first world, those people who are doing all right. You may not be in the top 3% of wealth in the US like I am, but you're okay. You're certainly doing much better than people in Palestine are right now, or people in much of Mexico, just 2 miles to my south, or people in Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. You're most likely doing a lot better than they are. Most likely. I don't know any of you. I have no idea who is watching this podcast. I don't know your circumstances, nor do I have any interest in knowing them. That is none of my business. That's your business, not mine. I am willing to share my business with you because I have always been an open person about everything. Before the internet started, it was still an online universe. It was mostly BBSs, bulletin board systems. I ran one. There was also America Online, CompuServe, Delphi, Genie, and several other ones like it, which relied upon dial-up modems. There was no internet, so when you connected to one service, you could email, but you could only email people who were on that particular service. You couldn't email, say, from CompuServe to America Online or from Genie to Delphi. You were limited in what you could do. One day we got an email and it said, "Oh, the internet started. Now, all you need to do is to put that person's username into the to box, followed by the @ sign and the domain." And I really didn't know, nobody knew what a domain was, but they explained it. So AOL, AOL.com, CompuServe, CompuServe.com, Prodigy, Prodigy.com, etc. At that time, most email addresses were .com. It's only been in recent years that there has been this explosion in higher level domains. But when that happened, and we suddenly became aware that we were a part of a world community. What community was that? Was it a community which included the poor nations of the world? Was it a community which included the fourth world peoples in my own country or other countries? Generally not. Generally not. So, in a sense, there has been what is sometimes called a digital divide. People who have internet access and people who don't. And believe it or not, even here in the United States where I am, there are people who do not have internet access. I know that from personal experience because many of my students, and I only retired a year ago, many of my college students did not have access to the internet. And so instead, they would have to come onto campus and use one of the computers on the college campus instead. That was the only option they had. Or I suppose they could go to a public library. So there is a big difference between what I have, what other people have, people who are professional class, middle class, working class in the United States have, and people who are working poor, underclass have in the United States. And usually, an even bigger difference with people in many countries far away, places like India, like Pakistan, like Bangladesh, like Haiti. So I think we need to keep all of those people in our thoughts all the time. In my opinion, I have literally no right to ignore them. My responsibility is to them. That is why, as a sociologist of religion, I drew upon my knowledge of Buddhism, although I am not a Buddhist. And I refer to the concept of loving kindness or compassion, which is basic to almost all, if not all, schools and sects of Buddhism. I know a lot about religions. It's my field. Religious studies, along with social theory, are my specializations as a sociologist. And so I could talk about that with some degree of expertise. I'm certainly not an expert on most things. Certainly mechanical things. I'm horrible in them. Horrible in them. Computers, software, yeah, that I'm good at. But not fixing a computer. Certainly not that. I know a lot of people who are really good at that. Not me. But my knowledge got me to the point where I am. Enabled me to overcome many of the limitations of my autism, much more than most autistics do. I know a lot of autistics, and most of them are poor. Most of them. Now, are all autistics poor or most autistics poor? Not all. Most? I don't know. But certainly, autistics are below the national average in the United States. And there are similar statistics around the world. And that's not because we're lazy. We're not lazy. I certainly was never lazy. But because of our communicative and our cognitive impairments, it makes it difficult for us to function in a neurotypical, a neurologically typical world. A world which is dominated by people who are more neurologically typical. I am, by definition, neurodivergent. Now, neurodivergence or neurological divergence certainly includes more than autistics. It includes people with ADHD, with intellectual disabilities, with various types of mental illnesses, and so on. All of which who would be considered, I think, as neurodivergent. They also would be in the fourth world. So the fourth world in the US is pretty large. Much of it is homeless. Often the fourth world gets ignored in the US. It used to be that if you had a serious psychiatric disorder, you would be kept in a state psychiatric hospital. Now, those places were no fun. From personal experience, I can tell you that. I was committed to one for 2.5 months. We were beaten by whips, well, belts, same difference. Once, when a woman, I can remember her name, but I won't repeat it, beat me. I told my parents. My father went to her. And rightly or wrongly said to her, if I ever hear that you have done something like this again, I will meet you downstairs in the alley. And he was not pulling any punches. He was deadly serious. He would have beaten her to a pulp. I assume he would have gone to prison, but he would have done it. That was my father, who was also autistic, as it turned out, although none of us knew that. Nobody knew I was autistic because schizophrenia childhood type, although it was defined as autism in the DSM-1 and the DSM-2, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, as autism, I didn't know that. I don't think most people with that diagnosis of schizophrenia childhood type knew that. So I think that what we need to do, those of us with means, and I don't only mean people with the kind of means that I have, but just anybody with any means at all, is to reach out to the third world, reach out to the fourth world, and find whatever resources we can find and give them to people from that part of the world. And to engage in conscientization, to raise the consciences, the consciousness, the consciences of people in the third world. Because they, I believe, will be the new humanity. They will be here, I think, I could be wrong, when the first world is gone, or at least gone for the most part. Revolutions, well, revolutions will take place in the third world, I think. Exactly what form that will take, I don't know. It really is none of my business. Maybe the destruction of the first world itself will be the revolution. Maybe. I have no inside knowledge into these things. But regardless, I think we need to plan for the future. The first world began destroying this planet through climate change. Now, some third world countries like India, for example, have joined in. Their justification? Well, you people in the West, first world, became wealthy by polluting the air, by abusing the resources of our planet. How else can we become successful? In other words, they have not yet experienced conscientization. That I see as my responsibility. And if you are in the first world, especially, maybe even if you are in the third world, but you have achieved conscientization yourself, then I hope that you view it as your responsibility as well to reach out and try to raise the consciences and the consciousnesses of people who live in the third world and people who live in the fourth world. Otherwise, I mean, I can't predict the future, so I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or a minute from now. But otherwise, I personally don't see a future for our planet. And I would like there to be a future. We humans have been around on this planet for a long, long time. To see us suddenly end because of human greed and stupidity, other words for capitalism, would be a real tragedy. And it is a preventable tragedy. Things do not have to end that way. We have the ability to change it. For now, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Maoist Third Worldist Collective. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.